right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co-host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you after a Week 2 Rams loss against the San Francisco 49ers, 23-30 at home in Los Angeles. And as Jake and I talked about in our preview episode for this game, obviously, big division rivalry, right? That's kind of something that we were all aware of. But, we also knew that the 49ers are one of the top teams in the NFL right now and that this was going to be a tough game. I think all of us can leave that game, although it's a loss, really proud of how the Rams played because, Jake, the Rams were in this game all of the first half. For some reason, they came out the second half and they really struggled. They just didn't look like the same team. And, I think that ultimately hurt them against a team like the 49ers. And we'll talk about kind of all the things that went wrong. Really, particularly, there was a string of plays in the fourth quarter that kind of sealed the deal, I think, for the Rams. And we'll get into that. But, I think the silver lining in this loss to the 49ers is that this team proved that they are competitive this year. I mean, the Rams looked really good and they were hanging in there with San Francisco for the majority of the game. And that made me really excited. And a lot of our young guys, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, Kyron Williams, all really came up big. And we're going to talk about that as well. But Jake, overall, what were your thoughts on this Rams game versus the 49ers?
Yeah, I came away, really impressed that they're ahead of schedule, essentially. I mean, I know there are 49er fans out there that don't really quite understand where the Rams were, and just interacting with them on Twitter, I had no idea. A lot of them thought the Rams were going to be decent this year. And so they apparently didn't see what we saw throughout the whole offseason, how they're going to tank for Caleb Williams. They're going to win 3 games. They're going to win 4. They're going to win 5. But they're not going to come close to the playoffs. They didn't see that. So they looked at it a certain way, but I think a lot of Rams fans looked at it another way. And that way was kind of similar to you and I. I've never seen just so much groupthink. And I mean that with zero disrespect. I think we kind of all had the same mindset. This team is ahead of schedule. This team was not supposed to win. And this team fought hard. And at the end of the day, with everything going on with Cam Akers, they didn't let that affect them. And I mean, look, like, you could say what you will, but that's still a teammate. That's still one of those brothers. That's still, you have something like that sprawl up right before the game, and that could be considered for many a locker room issue, right? And so the Rams didn't really let that bother them. That wasn't really even a story at all. Because the new starting running back, Kyron Williams, who you and I have been pounding the stump for, went over. He hit 100 yards from scrimmage in his first ever start. He had back-to-back 2 touchdown games, he's the only offensive player in Rams history to do that. That's regardless of running back. And that's saying a lot because there's been a lot of talented offensive players for the Rams. And, I think I was just really enthused about Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua, who, by the way, are the leading duo in the NFL in receiving yards, which is insanity when you think about it. So I just think, putting it into perspective, to see that this team, when I had 28-24, I wasn't far off. Like, this team really does have what it takes to go against the best of the best. And I think the Rams made a statement. They're back. They may not be the best team in the NFL, but from here on out, they are going to be hell to stop. And really what it came down to is the ball bounced a few different ways for the 49ers. If the Kyron Williams play, the guy drops the interception, it's a completely different game. And then you look at the Van Jefferson play where he runs the wrong route or whatever that was. I hate it for Matthew Stafford because he comes out of this game with 2 interceptions, and you're thinking, man, I don't feel like that stat sheet really shows what Stafford did in that game. And it kind of the same thing with Kyron Williams, the interception. You can't let that one play take away everything he did well in this game. And so, I think we're talking a lot about the offense here, at least I am, but just to know that this offense can hang with the Niners defense. The offensive line was great in the first half. Alexis, I think the levee just broke when Joe Noteboom went down, because what they were doing is they were basically utilizing his athleticism, and they were double teaming the interior guys. So like an Arik Armstead or a Javon Hargrave, they were double teaming those guys. And essentially that was working the entire game, because what would happen is you would have Noteboom and so forth right there, probably a Coleman Shelton. Then Noteboom would come over and slide over to the left, or he'd slide over to the right for some extra added protection. And he could do that because of his athleticism. However, Ankrum, who we like, and I don't think he was terrible, so I have to be very clear about that, is not that athlete. And he struggled there. And that is when the 49ers, they really smelled blood in the water. And furthermore, Alexis, I think it also hurt because when the Rams went down, now the 49ers know it's going to be pass happy Sean McVay. They've seen this movie before, and they did kind of go a little bit against, away from the run, losing against one of the best teams in football. I get it. And so the 49ers started sending 5, and that's when it became too much.
Let's talk about things kind of in a little bit in a chronological order, right? Because I think it was two very different teams, the first and the second half of the game. So talking about the first half and the offense, looked really good. There was not much, if anything, that the Rams did wrong. I think they might have had a penalty or two in the first half offensively, but there really wasn't much that the Rams offense did wrong. Let's talk about the run game, because that's how we scored all day. Although technically Kyron's second touchdown, I guess, was counted as a receiving touchdown. But Kyren Williams, guys, and the reason this is a big story is we should backtrack a little bit. Literally an hour, maybe a few hours before game time, we all collectively learn that Cam Akers is a healthy scratch. So I'm sitting there a couple hours before game time. I get the notification about Cam Akers. My first move is I had him starting in fantasy leagues. So I'm going to my leagues. I'm taking Cam Akers out, sitting there going, okay, what's going on? Healthy scratch. Obviously, we know that indicates that a few things that we can get into as well. But then the second thing that happens is about an hour after that, I forget who wrote the article. It was Jeremy Fowler, I think, who broke the news. Someone else wrote the article. Article comes out that the Rams earlier in the week had named Kyren Williams the running back 1. So this is something that had been set in motion already before Cam Akers became a healthy scratch. So all this kind of comes out right before we start the game. And Jake, you and I are obviously very high on Kyren. Everybody knows that I'm very high on Kyren. I've been on him for a very long time. So much to the point that there are people I know, sadly, who are actively rooting against him because I like him so much, which is really lame. But I see it on social media, and that they now are like annoyed that I like him so much. So, but whatever. The thing about this that I find interesting, but also not all that interesting to you and me, is I got a lot of heat a long time ago for saying that Kyren Williams would probably overtake Cam Akers as running back 1. I got a lot of heat saying that Kyren Williams had a more diverse skill set than Cam Akers did.
Oh, that's obvious. That's not even close.
We both got a lot of heat when the news came out. You and I know some things about the attitude problems and the way that things went down last season, where Cam Akers, he pushed Darrell Henderson off this team. The Rams made a choice. They made a choice to appease Cam Akers, who wants to be the lead guy. He wants to be the bell cow. They gave him that chance. And yes, he did have a few weeks, especially towards the end of the season, where I thought Cam Akers did very well in that role. I think the problem with Cam Akers is he's too inconsistent. He's not consistent enough to be the guy that he wants to be. And then the problem is when he doesn't get to be that guy, he gets very, very angry. Well, guess what? He might have pushed Darrell Henderson off the team, but he's not pushing Kyren Williams off the team. There's no way. When you have a guy like Kyren Williams, they're not sitting him, and they're not going to give you more reps just because you want it. So it did make me sad, though, because I do like Cam Akers a lot as a player. I think it's very obvious, and I'll let you touch on this, Jake, that his time with the Rams is done. That's not just kind of
Oh yeah, he's
conjecture at
gone.
this point. It's being reported on in the media. Just Sean McVay himself said that he is pretty positive that Cam Akers will be traded. So I think that this game for Kyren was not just us seeing what he could do. It was really him showing why he can be the running back one for this team. Because there's a lot of people still who don't think that Kyren should be our running back one. They are, think we should trade for a Jonathan Taylor or trade for a different running back. Which honestly, in my opinion, the running back market's not that hot right now. And a lot of running backs are injured. I mean, we saw what happened last night, tragically, to Nick Chubb.
That was
Um,
awful.
it was awful. I felt so bad for him. And I just think, the running back market isn't really that lucrative right now. So I don't even care about any of that because I really do think that Kyren can be our running back one. I mean, and we saw it. I mean, he's leading the NFL in touchdowns, by the way. If anybody didn't know, he's the only player with 4 touchdowns this NFL season. But Jake, I'll let you now kind of take the reins on the running back situation. What were your thoughts on the Cam Akers news that came out before the game? And then what were your thoughts on what Kyren did during the game, and how does that affect the Rams going forward?
Yeah, I think it was just a bummer. I mean, but the weird thing is, Alexis, I saw this coming, and we talked about it after the week 1 game. Didn't look, he scored a touchdown at the end of that first game against Seattle. It just felt like it was almost an appeased type of touchdown. Like Kyren easily could have 5 touchdowns. I mean, we know he's probably would have been, it would have made the most sense to give it to the guy that's pretty much undefeated in the red zone at the goal line and so forth. But they gave Akers the touchdown, and we just kind of saw, his attitude. He just seemed a little off in a game where you're up by 17. I don't know why you look so like down. And I just think really what it came down to is, and we can say a bunch of different things. Okay, he doesn't fit the blocking scheme, run scheme, whatever. I think Akers is a specific running back who needs the ball, and he cannot work in a running back by committee. Does not fit today's era of football because it's running back by committee everywhere. But furthermore, he doesn't work in today's like era because he can't pass protect. And the Rams, I mean, I felt like the Rams underutilized him in the receiving game, to his credit. So I am defending him there. But because they did that, and because he couldn't pass protect, it's exactly what we've been saying. It was letting the defense and everyone know in the stadium when the Rams were running. And when you're queuing in when your team is going to run every time, it makes it very easy for a defense to eliminate all possibilities to defend. And so when you look at the 21 out of 28 snaps he's carrying the football against Seattle, like I thought the writing was kind of on the wall after that. And if like I wasn't sure if he was going to recover, but going into the 49er game, I was like, I mean, he's going to have less than 30 yards. Like we were talking about that. I was like, he's not going to have a good game. It's not a good matchup at all. And I felt like with Kyren Williams watching the tape, all 22, he's got 53 snaps. He's in there in receiving downs, pass pro, can run the ball. There's no nonsense with Kyren. He hits the hole. Sometimes he hits it a little too quick where the actual scheme, the blocking scheme doesn't develop in time. But that's okay because he's going to get better with that. And this was his first actual start. But when you look at Kyren, he's just a better running back. And I understand Akers has 100-yard games, and Akers had the 171-yard game that people are still holding by against the Patriots. Look, I've been on the Akers train, off the Akers train, on the Akers train, off the Akers train. I can tell you right now, I've given this guy plenty of opportunity. Okay. I don't know if it's an agent. I don't know what it is. I just don't think he's a fit for the Rams. Hearing that he didn't adhere to what they were, their conduct or whatever. I personally would not have put that out there if I'm trying to trade somebody because I feel like that lowers the value. But Alexis, and I mean this with all due respect to Cam Akers, let's just move on. Just get him off the team because it's just dead weight right now. And I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but this team has a chance to compete and have a long playoff run. I'm saying that right now. They have a chance. They proved that this week. Like, if they keep this up, they're only going to get better. Like, Kyron's only going to get more experience. Tutu, Atwell, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp's going to be back. Just let's keep this thing going. And so the best thing you can do is just move on for Makers as soon as possible. I know my guy Jordan Schultz reported that the Ravens are interested. They've made calls. The Browns have, the Bucks have, and the Raiders have. No idea why the Raiders have. I have no idea. You have Josh Jacobs, you have Zamir White, you have Brandon Bolden, who you like more than anyone in the league. No idea why they're calling. I don't know why the Browns are calling. I don't know if you can say that Cam Akers is worth giving carries over what we saw yesterday, in relief with Jerome Ford and Peter Strong, who they traded for. And then, you look at the Ravens, it's like, I mean, can you give us Gus Edwards then? Like, I mean, I don't think he's better than Gus Edwards right now. So right now, I mean, Cam Akers' confidence is absolutely shot. And I don't think the value's really there. And I think they are going to trade him because that's what I've been told. It sounds like they are going to get something for him. But guys, I've seen like, oh, let's put him in a package with Van Jefferson and get Chase Young. You got to be realistic here. Who is trading for a guy that the Rams have basically said doesn't fit their culture? They've given now multiple opportunities to, and they basically decided that like he isn't good enough to bring back, and he missed a 5th round running back. With all due respect to Kyron, is now starting over him. Like, you have to understand, value is value. Right now, Cam Akers has about the lowest value. That whatever the Rams get is a win, because when you let everybody and their mother in the league know that you are trading somebody, you're most likely going to have to cut them. We see it all the time. We saw it with Todd Gurley. They ended up cutting Todd Gurley. I do think it would be funny and almost disgusting that the Rams could get more for Cam Akers than they did get for Todd Gurley, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a hard time finding a team that isn't going to require him to split carries. I'll say
there's
that.
Not a team out there.
There isn't a team, and that's his, I think, part of his whole issue is he doesn't want to do that. But I think the writing is on the wall. I think anywhere that he goes, in today's NFL, like, you're just going to have to split carries. And in any of the teams, I mean, you look at most NFL teams, like, I don't know that there's anyone with a running back who isn't being more productive than Cam Akers. So I do wish him the best. I am very bummed because I was looking forward to that duo of him and Kyron because they are very different running backs.
But I was excited.
I just think at this point, they need a fresh start. The Rams need a fresh start, without him. He needs a fresh start. I think maybe somewhere else, maybe he can get his confidence back and maybe change, what he's looking for. I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of apparent that Cam Akers will not be playing for the Rams again this season. But the hindsight of that is Kyron Williams, running back 1. I mean, I think he more than deserves it. I think he has proven that he has the talent to do so, and he's only going to get better. Like you said, I mean, this was his first real NFL start, and I'll be honest, I know it's not technically his rookie season, but I view it through my eyes kind of as Kyron's rookie season because he was out so much last year hurt. And then when he was healthy, they put him in like 3 snaps a game. You know why? Because they were giving 90% of the carries to Cam Akers. So this really is Kyron's first season really seeing any action and really being able to contribute. And I think he's done a good job. 4 touchdowns later. But let's talk about Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell. Talk about this offense. Nacua breaking records once again in his second NFL game. Now holds the record for most receptions by a rookie in his first 2 games. Very impressive. And Jake, it's hard not to think of Cooper Kupp when I see Puka Nacua out there. Just the way he plays the game, the way he runs his routes, the type of receiver he is. He's very similar to Cooper Kupp. And I'm very excited to see them play alongside each other. And then you see Tutu Atwell, who has a different skill set, but also very highly utilized, also did a really good job against the 49ers. I wish that they would have gone deep to him a little more. And I think that's kind of what they were thinking slightly on that one missed route in the fourth quarter. But I still want to see him go like long, which I'm sure we will soon. But Jake, how big is it that these two receivers have contributed so much to this offense?
It's everything, Alexis. I mean, if I joke about this, but for real, if you told me that Van Jefferson was going to have 37 yards on 5 receptions in the first 2 games of the season, but the Rams were going to have looked good in both games and have a record of 1-1, I would have said you were crazy. Because there's no way you would think coming into the season that Van Jefferson's going to have that bad of a game or that bad of a start. And you're thinking, oh, yeah, like Puka Nacua. Like, I was one of those tempered expectations guys with Nacua. I thought he was somebody get 40 to 60 yards in his rookie debut. But, like, everyone was like, oh, my God, he's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he might actually be. So that's the crazy thing. But the crazier thing here that isn't talked about enough is that Tutu Atwell is completely ripping that bust label off that people gave him prematurely. We saw it at the end of last year, the way he finished strong, was explosive, scored a touchdown in the last game. You could see, and I went back to the Saints game, and it's funny because you could see Kyren Williams almost fit the offense then more than Cam did. I don't even think Cam played that game, right? So Kyren Williams is getting throws out of the backfield from Matthew Stafford, and Tutu Atwell's getting bombs over the top from Matthew Stafford. So I thought it was interesting because that game was kind of a little bit of like a precursor of what we were going to see. And I think, the funny thing here is that Tutu Atwell, the common misconception is that he's just running straight down the field. He's stretching the field, all that. He can do that, but Tutu Atwell is 4th in the league in first down conversions. And if you go back, Alexis, the last like 6-7 years, first down conversions, it's a weird stat to justify who's the best receiver, but first down conversions, it's like every year the top 10 are like all elite receivers or top receivers of their game. And right now, Nacua and Atwell are 3 and 4. And it's crazy to think about that because the guys around him are Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk. And you're like, is Stafford not like spreading the ball out? And then you're like, well, he threw 6 balls to Kyren Williams. He threw 7 times to Tyler Higbee. He threw 4 to Van Jefferson. He got Skoranek and Rivers involved. He's doing what he can. I mean, I'd like to see them utilize Demarcus Robinson if this Van Jefferson epidemic continues. Because I mean, right now, like I'm not concerned with Van Jefferson because when Cooper Kupp comes back, he's going to be the 4th receiver. But in the immediate, like if he's not cutting it, you do have to throw Demarcus Robinson out there, give him a shot. Ben Skoranek, give him a shot. I thought Skoranek, the two touches he got, both over 10 yards, moving the chains, that is kind of just a little bit of a sample size of what you get with him and how I almost wouldn't mind seeing him in the backfield as like kind of maybe getting 5 carries a game just because he runs with power. He breaks tackles. And man, people say he's slow, but I don't really feel like he's that slow. So, I mean, maybe he looks a little slow when he's returning kicks last year, but that's a little different. So I'd like to see something like that, get him involved, because I do feel like Kyren getting 14 carries, I'd like to see him get in the 20s, but if you don't feel like he can get in the 20s, you're going to have to spread those carries out. And it does beg the question, do they end up going out and getting a running back? Because, if you don't think Kyren can take on 14 carries, but you do think he's your starter, you do want to roll with him, okay, does Ronnie get that? Does Royce get that? Does Zach Evans get that? To me, I see Zach Evans as more a long-term guy. I don't think he's necessarily going to go in there. But anyway, point I'm making here is that the offense is looking good, and they've really had to pick up for what was lacking with Van. And I hate to say it, but Tyler Higbee's kind of off to a slow start as well.
Yeah, it is. It has been kind of surprising, the lack of, Van Jefferson, for lack of a better term. But, he's not getting even that many targets. He's getting less targets than Puka, off the bat, right? I mean, it wasn't like Van Jefferson was getting all these targets and then he was making drops and then he was, uh, whatever, and then they slowed down. It was kind of off the bat, he wasn't getting targeted as much. I don't know if that means anything or not. I don't know if it's a reflection on Van or if it's more of a reflection on Stafford's chemistry with guys like Puka and Tutu and Tyron. But I will say, to the Ben Skoranek thing, Ben is like that gadget player. Like, we've seen him kind of do everything. We've seen him run the ball. We've seen him, in the slot. We've seen him as a vertical threat, making those catches 1v1. By the way, Jake, I think that is your mic. Not that it really matters, because everyone watching this show knows that my mic has made me sound like a squirrel at points because it goes up 3 octaves for no reason. And then I'm listening to the podcast. I'm like, I don't sound like that in real life. But people might not know that because my equipment is terrible. It's actually not terrible. There's just something wrong that I haven't figured out what it is. But yeah, I just think that, this offense, you have a very diverse skill set amongst a lot of different players. And that is definitely something that the Rams can use to their advantage. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. Now, let's talk about, do you want to talk about the defense first, or do you want to talk about what went wrong in this game?
I mean, let's give the defense their credit.
Let's talk about defense first. You go ahead.
I understand they gave up 30 points. I get that. And I understand they gave up 116 on the ground to McCaffrey, but I was really impressed with this young defense coached by Raheem Morris. I thought this was the first time that I've seen any defense slow down Brock Purdy. You can count the Eagles because he got hurt in that game. But like, for a full game of Brock Purdy, he's thrown 2 touchdowns in every game. We've heard it nonstop throughout the week. The Rams held him to 1 rushing touchdown, which was a QB sneak. But for the most part, I thought they slowed him down. People will say, oh, well, if he only hit those throws, he didn't hit those throws. The reason he doesn't have that deep ball. Knew that. So they got pressure in his face and made it hard for him to complete that pass. What you have to be careful of is, whether you're a fan of the Niners or the Rams and watching this, you don't want to discredit good football, because at the end of the day, there's an opponent versus an opponent. And to just say, oh, well, we would have won or we would have blown him out if Brock Purdy hit 2 touchdowns. It's like, well, he didn't hit those 2 touchdowns because the overthrow was done by the pressure and the fact the Rams are playing their defense expecting Brock Purdy. Like, they didn't buy into Brock Purdy in this game. I'm just going to be honest with you. I thought they played him well. And, I just think at the end of the day, like, yeah, okay, they played him well, but I just think right now, looking at it, he was just taking the short stuff because there's a lot of pressure. So look, like, okay, you get your 17 of 25 for 206 yards. But I thought the Rams had a good game plan, and I had a couple of those calls gone differently. I think they come away with the W, and I think that people were complaining about the kick at the end of the game, and I'll just say I'm glad that Sean kicked that, because one, for everybody that bet on the Niners spread, you lost money, so take it. And 2, I liked it because, to me, 30-23 I can live with. I feel like that was what we really saw. 30-20 wasn't what we really saw. I understand it's a difference between 3 points, but does that make sense? 20-23 is really the game that we saw. They just missed this one.
Well, right. And let's talk about why that is, because I think that it's important, when we talk about being happy with the loss, we're obviously not happy with the loss, but what we're doing is, watching the game as a whole. The Rams, I'm not going to say they deserve to win this game, because I don't think that's the case. I thought they hung in with the 49ers, but they did make a lot of mistakes that I think they have to own up to. And they also committed a lot of penalties. A lot I didn't agree with that was called, but there were some that I thought were valid. So that's also on them. But let's talk about Jake. I think so. The first bad play, obviously, and everyone let me know it, was when Kyren deflected that pass that caused the interception. This was in the third quarter. The game was tied, and there was a quarter and a half left of football. So for anybody saying that's why the Rams lost, you don't know how sports work. Yes, momentum's a real thing, but if you can't come back in a tie game in a quarter and a half, it's kind of on the team as a whole, and then you don't deserve to win. That's just reality. But also, I think what people weren't remembering, the Rams weren't scoring before that. They didn't come out the second half. I mean, they came out and were struggling pretty hard in the second half, which kind of gave me PTSD, because I feel like we've seen that a lot from Sean McVay. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, how the Rams, like, if they're not winning at halftime, sometimes it's hard for them to like come back from that. But obviously, the first play that went really bad was that interception. And that was on Kyren. I think he took his eyes off at the last second. He got a little bit ahead of himself. And also, honestly, I don't think he was expecting that pass to be as forceful as it was, just by his reaction. I think he was, there was a lot of heat on that ball, and I just don't think he was prepared, and he made a mistake. It happens. Not great. He shouldn't have made it, but it is what it is. So then, I think they only gave up 3 off that interception, which is good, because they were, it was in our half of the field. So then they get down by 3. You get into the fourth quarter, and that was when it started to get really dark. That's when Joe Noteboom gets hurt. After that, you start to see our offensive line just completely crumble. And I'm not saying it was all because of Noteboom. It could have been a chemistry thing. I don't know what it was, but that's when you start to see Stafford having less time to throw, less time to make decisions. Obviously, he gets rattled. Then there's the play, Jake, with Tutu Atwell. And I have to say, I've never seen Matthew Stafford angry. And I'm not
I
saying
don't even think he was as mad at Atwell as he was at the call, because I think he knew that call was coming in, and that is just not the spirit of the rule.
Well, he did have a lot of words for Atwell before the call came in, but then when the call came in, he was angry at that. And I wouldn't have called the grounding call on that, because in my mind, it's not grounding if you're clearly throwing it. Like, he thought Atwell was going to run a route that Atwell didn't run, right? That's probably mostly on Atwell. You could also argue it's a little bit on Matthew, because, I mean, yes, it's like clockwork. You think the receiver's going to be there, but he also didn't look to see if the receiver's going to be there. So there's that miscommunication issue. But then I wouldn't have called it grounding, because in my mind, I'm thinking, like, how is that intentional grounding? Like, he wasn't like throwing it at the.
No, it's dumb. It's really stupid. And
I just thought it totally threw things off, because then we had 2nd and 20. And then that same drive leads to the interception off of that Van Jefferson route. And I didn't see it in real time. In real time, what it looked like to me is it looked like Stafford tried to fit the ball in there when Jefferson had like 3 guys on him. But when you rewatch it and you see the replay, it looks like Van didn't really run the route correctly, and he didn't really run it with passion. Like, it didn't seem like, I don't know if there's a better word, but I know that everybody knows what I'm trying to convey. It was kind of like a weak route, where the timing then was totally thrown off from where Stafford was expecting him to be. when he threw that ball. He just wasn't there. And that obviously I don't think helps Fan. I think that's his second really big mistake he's made in 2 weeks. We remember that pass against Seattle. So then you start to have, you're down in the fourth quarter, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the Rams, I know at one point they had 5.5 minutes on the clock and they were down by 1 touchdown. And that's why I think I'm not as like excuse ridden as some people would like me to be about the fourth quarter. And Jake, I'll hear your thoughts, because in my mind, I was like, you have 5.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you're down by a touch. I mean, that's plenty of time. Even if you don't score, they didn't score on that, obviously, as we know, but then they still had time to get the ball back again. But then you had that drive that ended in the field goal, which was delightful because of the spread. It was kind of hard not to laugh in real time watching that. But Jake, what were your thoughts on that fourth quarter? Because that was kind of like it was just very disheartening watching it, because we'd watched the whole game and we were like, oh my God, we really have a chance, right? Like we were kind of falling behind and then we'd catch up and then we were hanging with them. And then it was just like everything went wrong, and you're watching the end of the game and it was just the timing. Yeah. What was your thoughts?
I mean, I think that the game just unraveled after Noteboom got hurt. I think, the BS grounding call, which isn't the spirit of the rule at all. The whole point of grounding is like, hey, I'm intentionally throwing it away and not even getting out of the pocket to do it. Just like, oh my God, I don't want to get sacked here. That's not what Stafford's doing. We know what Stafford's doing. The problem is Stafford somewhat to blame there, where he's expecting Atwell, who is running a curl, to now have to improvise and go against his body and go into the end zone, like run a, I get the sentiment. I see that. And I don't feel like that was as realistic as a lot of people make it out to be. Like, oh, Atwell should have done that. It's like, that's easy for you to say, but that's not the route that was supposed to be run. He ran the curl, and then Matthew saw something and wanted him to improvise. That's what happened. So he ran the correct route. It's a lot to ask in the moment. But what I will say is Noteboom going down really hurt it. And I think after that, just being down, this is the thing. If you stick with the 49ers, they have to respect the run still. But when you go down in a game against this defense, they will pin their ears back, and now they know you're passing. So they're going to rush you every time. They're going to send 5 or 6 guys. And that's what we were seeing. We were seeing Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, and they were sending the house. And it was like, Stafford, there's too many guys to block. So Stafford's getting hit. Stafford has to get rid of it. And you have to also keep this in mind. If the Rams were playing the boring style offense that Brock Purdy was playing, to, mediate all of that, then, Stafford doesn't have to have that much time. The reason why it looks like Stafford has no time is because he's trying to drop back pass and make throws 20, 25, 30 yards downfield, while Brock Purdy was taking the 5-yard routes. And that's the difference. So their offense is predicated on the short and intermediate passing attack. But in reality, I think it just became a little too much for what they were trying to do. And when they got down 10, then they really have to go down the field, so they don't even have any chance. I think, I do not blame Sean McVay for the loss. I don't blame Stafford. I don't blame Kyron. I mean, as a whole, first off, I think the officiating was really bad. I think they missed some really bad calls. And I think it wasn't necessarily called fair on both sides. I thought the Darion Kendrick bang pass interference call is way too much of a judgment call. You look at the referee, he was just like he didn't even wait. And to me, it's so bang there that you could say, oh, he hit him early. Atwell got hit early on that crazy catch that you and I were like going crazy about on the sideline. They didn't call anything there, And so I just don't feel like that was consistently called. I think they practically carried the Niners down the field on the last drive. It felt like they were calling everything a flag. Also, I haven't seen it, Alexis, but I was like reading stuff about how people were saying Brock Purdy, like the pass that he was throwing out of bounds, it did not land until it hit 0. So I don't know, but, if that's the case, then that would have been the end of it when he threw it away. But I think the big thing here is that you saw the improvement, you saw they're ahead of schedule, and the fact is things didn't go perfectly for them, and they still were in it. They still lost by 1 possession. I would in the future like to see Sean McVay in no man's land, because keep in mind that it was a kick out of bounds. So Sean McVay in no man's land, getting that close to midfield on that first opening drive of the half, I'd like to see him go for it on 4th and 2, because taking that, if you remember, he took the delay a game to punt. I think they should have gone for it on 4th and 2. I really do think so. I don't think they would have stopped him. And the game is completely different if they do go for it on 4th and 2 and make it. So, yeah, I just think for future reference, I think that is something that I would have liked to see. The interceptions just bug me because, you have Niners fans saying we picked off Stafford twice. And in reality, I thought Stafford played a great game. Sean McVay said that, and I think a lot of people have said that, but still, the stat sheet doesn't indicate that. And his stats on the season, it's like everything he did last week was nullified. If you look at the stats, he now has more interceptions than touchdowns, which just doesn't tell the story of how his season is off to, I think, a really fast start for the first 2 games. But yeah, Alexis, I mean, you can only do so much. The margin for error, and Sean McVay kept using that term, and a lot of people were, the margin for error against a Super Bowl level team is so slim. So if you're turning the ball over, that's how you're going to lose. Like I saw Kyle Shanahan's speech after the game. Basically, he said, good game. They turned the ball over. We didn't. That's why we won. And it's really that simple. I mean, I thought the Rams had him on the ropes at one point. They let him back in it. And then the turnovers really just allowed the Niners to take over the game, just enough to win by a possession. I think this is what you want to see, though, out of this young team, that they're scratching, they're clawing, they're fighting their way, and a defense at the end of the game forcing a field goal, 4 plays, 7 yards after the intercept touchdown, and forces 2 punts in between then. I think the defense doesn't get enough credit the way they play in the second half, because it was back to 2022, Alexis, where the offense wasn't really able to move the ball and the defense was having to go back out there, not ready to play, by the way. They were tired, and they were still, I mean, the last possession of the game, they force a punt. They still make it interesting. Hats off to the defense, and hats off to Raheem Morris, who just continues to show every day. He's definitely going to be a head coach next year. I don't know what team it'll be. Maybe it'll be the Chicago Bears, but I think he's definitely going to be a head coach because of what he's doing, how he's leading these kids, and turning this defense into something that's not, a joke. It's impressive.
Yeah, I think the big story, coming out of this game is, the Rams are a really young team. We have a lot of new faces in really key positions. I mean, Puka and Tutu, starting receivers, Kyron starting running back. Look at the defense, all those new faces and young guys on the defense. It really, I think, says a lot about who the core of this team is, the way that they fought the first 2 games. And even though they did lose to a Super Bowl caliber team like the 49ers, as we've said, they hung in there with them, and they're only going to get better. It's only week 2. If we were watching this game after these guys had been playing 16 weeks, it might be a little bit of a different vibe. But I think going forward, and next week, we'll have a preview episode, Monday Night Football, first primetime game of the season for us. Going forward, I think it's really exciting to see how they progress and how much they get better, because it can only, if everyone stays healthy and everyone keeps doing their thing, it really can only go up from here. And Cooper Kupp is going to come back, which I think is going to add some life into this offense, which at the moment is pretty live. Everyone's doing pretty good. So, I was very happy with how the Rams played on Sunday. Like I said, I just couldn't close it out there at the end, but they'll learn from that. I think that, they're hungry. I think that they're all hopefully going to stay healthy. And we'll see how it goes. But guys, that is going to do it for us. As always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Downtown Rams. You can follow me on Twitter at the Alexis Kraft. You can follow Jake at JK Bogan. And guys, until next time, stay safe and go Rams.